actually 2 episodes of the Nonfiction Brand podcast, and she comes all the way from the North Coast or North Coast. Is it the North Coast or North Coast? Queensland, Australia. Well, we're going to answer that question and a whole lot more as I introduce you to this lovely lady who I've gotten to know via my Australian friendships with people like Kate Toon and others who are Sydney-based. But here's the thing. This is Lisa Galea, and she is actually a little bit north and a tad bit east of Sydney and just south of Brisbane in Gold Coast, right? Now, first question you got to answer is it Gold Coast or the Gold Coast?
Gold Coast.
So there is no definitive article in Gold Coast.
No.
Very cool. Well, anyway, welcome to the Nonfiction Brand podcast. I'm really excited to talk to you because as we were kind of doing a little bit of pre-show banter, it seems like we probably have similar careers, but different. And what I mean by that is I'm obviously coming from a writing background as a copywriter, a longtime copywriter and creative director. But you, on the other hand, are coming from the distaff side of creative land, which is art direction. And for any nonfiction branders out there who have not been in a creative department at an ad agency or a design firm, typically brains are bifurcated into you're a writer or you're an art director or designer, graphic designer. So oftentimes people will be paired up. A writer will be paired up with a graphic designer or an art director with a design sensibility. I like to think of it as the visual and the verbal. Someone's got to be better at verbal. Someone's got to be better at visual. But ideally, there's a lot of crossover.
100%. We really do the same job, but I output it visually and you output it with words, I think.
Yeah, and that's one of the things you learn, especially working at an ad. One of the things you learn, especially working at an ad agency, is when you find a creative who you mesh with, treasure them like the rarest pearl in the ocean because it doesn't happen often. And I think we're all aware of Walt Disney, and his whole idea of plussing things. And it's kind of funny. I say this because I look at your LinkedIn banner for your profile, and it's a quote from Walt Disney. People often ask if I know the secret of success and if I could tell others how to make their dreams come true. My answer is, you do it by working. Walt Disney. Why did you choose that quote from Walt to be your kind of mantra on the banner of your LinkedIn profile?
Well, Walt Disney I've been collecting memorabilia since I was 11. So I do have a big room that is now decorated with Mickey things. Only Mickey Mouse is now allowed in my house. I have to put a ban on most Disney. So Walt Disney, though, I've read all his stories and I really loved how he ran his business. And you have to put energy in. But you can dream as big as you want, but then I believe you put energy in. You have to make the effort to get your dreams to come true.
Well, there you go.
But I do believe dreams can come true. That I think is in my definitely core belief.
Well, looking at your resume listing or your CV listing in LinkedIn, you've worked for yourself quite a long time, right? Can you give us a quick overview of the career of Lisa Galea of Gold Coast, Queensland, Australia?
Okay. Well, interesting. I'm from London originally. But my parents moved to Australia. We traveled. I lived in Middle East, Africa. We traveled to Australia when I was a teenager. I did university here and I studied science and genetics. Then I moved 2 years in, was like, what am I doing? I'd done art history and moved over to design. And just then I went straight back to London. My dad was like, why don't you go back to London and see what it's like working there? I was thinking of getting married. I was like 19 as a silly girl, but I got to London and did 5 years working in advertising there. So that was really my groundwork where I learned my craft. I believe in print design, and because I knew computers so well and I'd been using programming since I was like 11, Studying design at university and college, there was no computers. My first year out, Apple took over the world.
Right.
So there was a lot of creatives who couldn't use computers. And I was like this science nerd who could also do creatives. So I got to work with some really top creatives, really making what they wanted happen on screen
Right.
and print out and produce as they wanted, which it used to be a lot harder. Like, there was no drop shadow button. So it was a lot harder to create that sort of stuff back then.
Yeah.
So I did that for 5 years and then moved back to Adelaide, Australia with my family. I eventually realized my parents were right. I'd probably have a better life in Australia than living in London, even though it's my hometown and I'll always love London. I worked in wine labels in Adelaide. There's not much advertising happening there. It is a city in Australia, but I'd say smaller town version, we would call it.
What's the population in general?
Oof. It's probably got 1 million. I wouldn't know for now, but it is a small country town. Everyone knows each other, but it's a city with one big main street.
Got it.
It's a beautiful place to live. It's a beautiful place lifestyle wise, but there wasn't really advertising going on that level. But the wine industry is massive there. Hardy's, Penfolds. So I ended up working in the wine label industry for a few years. And then me and my husband went on a road trip up to Queensland, and I never went back home I'd sort of just was like, I'm over it. I almost felt like I'd been designing and I was just pumping stuff out. Like I almost was at a toothpaste factory. It was just too easy. And it was just all the time wine labels. And I'm not that sort of person who likes to do repetitive stuff. So
Right.
we went traveling and just decided Queensland. We went all the way to the top and got on the beach, and it was like, there's coconuts and palm trees and like no one on the beach. It's exactly what you'd imagine Australia to be like. Whereas Adelaide's like an English country town, more
Hmm.
like it's got weather, it's got English weather, the proper seasons. Up here, we just have wet and dry seasons, much more tropical. And I was like, this is where I want to live. If I'm going to live not in London, I want to live holiday. So basically, we started our own marketing business. He was already doing sales for car dealers, like running events. He'd been doing that in Adelaide. So he just came up to Queensland. I started working with him, doing all the direct mail and the advertising side of it. And yeah, we've been doing that for 3 years, I think.
Wow. And that, that's the wonderful thing about being a creative. You can basically work anywhere because your tools are all in your head. You can go anywhere and reset up your computer system or whatever you want. And you can do it literally from anywhere. You can do it literally from anywhere if you have developed what I would call a personal brand that allows people to know who you are, what you do, and how you do it so that they come to you. I mean, yeah, you've got to do some outbound marketing. You have to do some outbound marketing. But if you're a good creative, you have to do very little of that because your current customers become what I like to call your unpaid sales force. When someone
100%.
Yeah, when someone says, "Oh my gosh, where'd you get that fantastic brochure? Where'd you get that wonderful video? Where'd you get that? I love the way your website writing is, or how it tells the story. Where'd you get that?" That's when your customers start selling for you because they chose you because you are completely true to who you are as a person and you communicate that via everything you do. You demonstrate it. And, I see you nodding your head, and tell me if that rings true to you.
Oh, 100%. I've never really, it's all really been word of mouth. Even moving up here, I think I had children then. I was in that stage of life. I'd got married, I had my children, and I was known for doing wine labels. They found me up here. An ad agency had asked, and they were like, "Oh, Lisa does wine labels." Queensland's not a very big wine place. And I just got contacted doing work for that. And then people found out. I decided I wasn't going to do design and started doing filmmaking for people. But unfortunately, you're asking for their footage, and it didn't really work out because you can't run a business where you ask people to do things. So then eventually my graphics just built up. And it was really slowly like my studio at the beginning was just odd work, word of mouth. And then that's just grown and grown. And That's really been my main. I think when they trust you, someone said to me, "Oh, they move on." I'm like, you can raise your prices if you've helped the customer earn more money.
Right.
My customer for 10 years, they've not going away because I'm part of their team. I help them grow to that position. So they're happy to pay me more money now. I'm now like in their marketing, like I'm almost their brand consultant marketing department. And I treat my customers like it's my business.
Yeah.
And I've grown my other businesses on the side as well. So I think I understand their struggles. I've got two other businesses, a wholesale business, and we've dabbled playing with experiments as different entrepreneurs do during the journey. And so the struggles of building businesses, and I see inside how businesses work. I've had that privilege as a designer. I think we get to see how other people's businesses work.
Well, before we started talking during this podcast, we were kind of, doing a little bit of meet and greet, getting to know each other a little bit. And I was making the point that I'm certainly older. Put it this way, I like to refer to myself as vintage. And since you come from the wine industry, you'll appreciate what I mean by vintage. And you said kind of more or less that that's a good thing. And that's funny you say that because I believe that to be true. However, a lot of agencies that, one of the big reasons I've been such a violent proponent of personal branding is because I did it so poorly for 20 plus years of my career, where I was the creative engine working with a team behind the wall of an agency, kind of like an engine in a car. Well, here's the thing about an engine in a car. You may be doing really great stuff, but the second or the moment that there is the thought in somebody's mind that, well, we should probably get a cheaper, newer engine because it's cheaper and newer, they can unbolt that nameless engine out of the chassis of the agency at any time, and they can just say, we no longer need your services. And I literally was that engine, a nameless engine, because I didn't bother to name my engine, my brand, to the point that people are like, no, you can't get rid of him. He's the reason we're here. But that's what I hear you saying is, I'm a brand to the point where people wouldn't even consider leaving me because I'm their team. They know me. I'm a member of their staff, and it would never enter their minds to move on.
No, they're not. Then like I'm invested. I love them. That's what I believe. They should love me. I should love them. Otherwise, I'm not really happy working for you.
Well, and the thing one of the points I wanted to make about bringing up the whole age aspect was that I do agree with you that there is value in having people who work for you who've had their own business,
Oh,
who
100%.
yeah, who understand the pressures and the weight and the stress and no, I'm not just saying change it because of, whatever. It's because we need it to be a certain way and there are reasons for it. One of the things a lot of young creatives do is get very, very obstinate about making changes, or you can see it on their face in a meeting where they hate it because you're messing with their baby. And the thing is, dude, hate to tell you, it's not your baby. It's their baby because they're paying for it.
Exactly.
Now, you can, if you build your brand the right way, be that provocative, creative resource that helps them get better work. I mean, I've seen your work and I follow you on Instagram and things like that. And I can tell that I'm guessing that you have regular conversations with clients on, yes, we could do it cheaper, or yes, it could be that, but consider this. I mean, does that
100%.
conversation?
I've actually got one customer who's been with me a very long time. I think I'll tell you the story of how we actually secured him as a customer, but he will come in. He's 91 years old, a developer. So he's very strong-minded. He's a Greek man. And sometimes he asks for changes and I will do exactly what he says always. But I would also then produce another copy of the brochure and say, well, this is what I would suggest, but here's both. What do you think? I want you to see both changes so you know the option. But of course, I'm doing what you say. He pays me and very big money. So if he wants to see his way, it is my job to educate him and I believe show him what it should be, but it's also my job to serve him and do what he says because he pays the bills. And if he can't see his version didn't work, it's much easier for me to show both.
Well, what you're doing when you do that, and this is again something that a lot of service people don't get, is when you show the A, which is their version, and your B version, by showing the A, you're showing respect for them, what they've asked for. You've heard them, you've demonstrated that you listen, but you also do the Walt Disney thing. You say, I listened, I understand, but I'm going to add more. I'm going to plus it up. I'm going to use my experience and expertise to try to give you a better product. Not for more money, but for the money you're paying. I want to give you at least the value you're paying for, and ideally, value plus.
100%. I think one of my customers did, came back to me after a few years. They're a marketing guy, he's a marketing consultant. And I said, well, this is my price now. That was 3 years ago. I'm now this price. And they're like, oh, Lise, we can get someone for this dollar an hour. So, and I'm like, that's fine because I can't go down to that price now. Why would I do that? I've got other clients filling my time. Within 3 weeks, they're back to me and go, but the thing is, Lisa, they just do what I ask. And a
Bingo.
customer yesterday in my meeting said to me, well, I asked them to do this and they just gave it back to me what I'd asked for. And I was like, I think lots of designers forget, how would a customer know what to ask for? They're not
Right.
designers. They know they should be giving us the clues of what they want and, what the physical assets are that need to be on the page. And like you said, we'll respect that. But it is our job as designers to educate them and say, this is what good design is.
Well,
And I think they recognize that and trust builds as the more you show, then in the end, you don't have to show them the junk one because they just go, do whatever you want, Lise.
yeah. And that is okay. What you're doing right now is what I preach every Sunday in the Church of Nonfiction Branding, which is you have to demonstrate. You can say all you want, but you have to demonstrate. And what I mean by that is I got a little write-up that Lisa sent to me about her background a little bit. And it has the blah, 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 how many years in business, brands she's worked for, that type of stuff. But she also has one line of copy that meant more to me and communicated more to me than anything else in there. And it says, she can tell in a second what will stand the test of time and what will date quicker than blue eyeshadow. That's what someone like me would want in a designer, which is I want it to be trendy, but not too trendy. I want it to be classic, but not too classic. Our brand is somewhere between classic Chanel and Alexander McQueen. Can you help me out? And what they're really saying is, I don't want a specific look. I want a look that fits us like a bespoke suit. Are you a bespoke tailor that can deliver that look, that totally branded look? And from what I've seen you do, and based on what I know about you right now, I think the answer is yes.
I think so. I think I've got to that point. I mean, it's 30 years on, you learn a lot of information, and I am having that big picture business point of view. And yeah, I believe, yes, I definitely can do that for people. And I study I love fonts and I've studied font psychology. I've done a lot on neuroscience. It's having that science background, it's all sort of woven in together, that I study behavioral economics and how our brain works and why we make decisions. And fonts are body languages. It's not really a choice. It's okay to be trendy on social media and do what you want, but they are saying so much to that person. It's without that person even realizing. So having that sort of knowledge, I think, also gives clients trust.
Well, I'll be honest with you. One of the things that I'm not a big believer in is the word salad after people's names, like certifications and stuff. Why? Because I'm a do-it-yourself guy, right? Everything I do is do it yourself. DIY is what I call it. And that's I've been a self and that's I've been a self-taught everything my entire life. Like the guitars behind me, self-taught, which is why I don't play out much. Believe me, you don't want to hear it. But I will
I'm the
say,
same.
yeah, but I will say this, that you recently got a behavioral economics certification from Ogilvy Consulting, taking the
And
course. And I hate to say it, but you're you've been in your career quite a few years. I mean, at this point in your career, my career, people tend to stop flying and start coasting. And I got to tell you, I'm kind of impressed by that. It was awarded on January 3rd of 2021. So, I mean, that's really, really fresh. And it's about
I
behavioral economics from Ogilvy Consulting, which is, David Ogilvy was one of the superstars of advertising from the previous century, which wasn't all that long ago.
well, one of the actual story of how we got that customer was from David Ogilvy's one of his ideas. We sent the customer we had the meeting, and then we sent a carrier pigeon. And the girl sat in reception for like 4 hours waiting for our 90-year-old man, who this was 15 years ago, to come downstairs. Eventually, his reception said, they're not going. They're standing there with a box and a pigeon. And when he opened the box, it said, it's either yes or no. He had to just write it on and put it in the pigeon. And I think for him, he loves to tell that story when we introduces us of how we got that attention. And I mean, he walked out and sent the pigeon out the front door of his building. Like,
Oh, wow.
that's how you get attention. But it was David Ogilvy's idea. I wouldn't like to take the credit for it, but that's how you get attention. That's you go above and beyond.
Yeah, and you demonstrate the quality of your thinking. And it sounds like you embrace that philosophy from the get-go. And
I think
I
you should always be learning too. That's why I study. Like I studied Kate's course 3 years ago on SEO. That I probably every year I pretty much study something. Like 1 year I'd do guitar lessons. I'm always on a little bit of, I did ballroom dancing for 4 years. I always go on little tangents where I'm learning things. I've learned to cook. So I'm always think it's good for your brain to be learning good things.
Yeah. Yeah, and frankly, it informs everything you do for your clients. And I'm guessing it's kind of core to your brand foundation. Have you done any deep thinking and actual codification of your Lisa Galea personal brand? Or is it, uh, I, you're a small business. So is there a difference between Burning Love Creative and Lisa Galea as
I
brands?
think I think yes. And I believe, like you, DP, I have not been online enough. Like I've built that solid foundation and it's been a word of mouth thing, but I should have been building up Lisa Gallia as a personal brand as well. I've been really anti, my daughter's just got into university, so that's excellent. But we had a lot of trouble with bullying, social
Yeah.
media from
Yeah.
probably age 13. So it was an area I was like, this is the most vile thing that's been invented. Why is anyone going on there? I'm not going on there. And I've dealt with a lot of things. So I can't believe what people do because they're allowed to hide. And
Yeah.
so I've really been sort of anti it. But then last January, I was like, it's time, Lisa Gallia. I feel like I've found my voice and I was like, it's time for Lisa to get out there. And I only started like last February online
But that's
in
the,
social media.
yeah, I got,
But they are two different things because burning love, I don't believe from social media. I've got enough work from that word of mouth and it being
right.
solid. But I want to, last year, I think you'll notice I did, I was like, I can only help people one on one. So I did Papua New Guinea for the Australian Awards. I've done mentoring, but it's been one-on-one really, or small groups. Whereas my long-term plan is to be able to help more people.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I have to get out there and be online to do that. So, but I've met amazing people. I've loved it. It's a completely new, exciting world, finding out about social media and how it works.
Well, and frankly, it people who don't do social media, and I'll be honest with you, I don't like it. It's not my milieu, you know. It's a little bit painful, but I'm also smart enough to recognize that I could take a penknife and try to cut down a tree, or I could use a chainsaw.
It's
Chainsaws,
powerful.
oh, powerful. Chainsaws are deadly. Chainsaws can be wielded by artists creating sculptures, or it can be or it can be wielded by Leatherface wearing Texas Chainsaw
Texas
Massacres.
Chainsaw, we're coming in.
Yeah, exactly. So if I totally get where you're coming from, because that's where I was. You know, I look back, and I've told this story on the podcast before. I look back when I joined things like Twitter, and it was like the first year Twitter was out. I was an early adopter of all these things because I had to understand them. I didn't want to do them though,
Well,
because
say for me, I put social media, I've worked into it. I understand it. I know
yeah,
the value. I know how it works, but I was like, I don't want to do this.
yeah. Well,
And I actually liked what you said in your last podcast. I'm really excited to get your book, but with the
authenticity.
selective authenticity. I think that was like, that rang true. It's like, okay, you don't have to tell them everything. And it's like, that's what I've sort of struggled with. Where's the line of, where do you draw the line of, and some people I see telling everything. And it's just been, I think, working out what part of my story do I want to share, and where am I at with all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and we're going to talk more about that in the second episode that I'm doing with Lisa. But I'm looking at the clock, and we're getting close to that 30-minute mark, which means it's time for me to kind of wrap things up a little bit. Lisa, I want people to be able to know how they could contact you or connect with you. Is there a place online that is kind of your best place for people to engage with you?
Instagram at the Lisa Gallia is the best place. Shoot me a DM. I love to chat and get to know you in there. That's my most social place. Or I go to my website, lisagallia.com. But if you want to just get social and drop in for a chat, I'd go to Instagram.
And Gallia is, or Gallia. Gallia. I've been saying Gallia, and that's incorrect. It's Gallia.
I say it as Gallia. I hear other people, but my husband's family say it as Gallia. So I'm like, I'll stick with that.
Yeah. All
But it's
right. And
Galea.
right. Okay. So Lisa, spelled Lisa, Gallia, Galea. Definitely
Mm-hmm.
check her out online, and follow her on Instagram, because you're going to see some really great design, if for no other reason. Definitely worth it. That's it for this week on the Nonfiction Brand Podcast. I, of course, am DP Knudten, but she is,
Lisa Gallia.
and we'll be talking at you next week. Bye-bye. Pause, pause, pause. All right, so we were talking last week about the story that you have created for yourself and how that relates to the brands that you currently serve, you know, or you currently work for, because they're your brands, but you're also fulfilling work for the brands that hire you to do that work. So you got brand, 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 brand. How do you partition your mind to be able to, I'll just pause for you.
Turn that off.
Yeah,
There
that's
you go.
great. So as I was talking about that, I'm talking brand, 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 brand. I mean, it's almost like you get in this labyrinth of brand. If you think of a brand like that, it can become very easy to get lost. But that's why you need to create a brand story, or have stories associated with your brand. Like the story you told about the carrier pigeon, or the homing pigeon, carrier pigeon.
Yeah, one of those pigeons that
Yeah.
goes home with
It's the passenger pigeon that no longer exists. Yeah. Anyway, stories like that are stories other people now tell about you. And I don't think people understand what, everybody talks about you got to be a storyteller and all that stuff, but they don't know what the stories are. And I guess this is a very long winded way of saying you demonstrate the story that you are. Do you have other examples of clients that you've begun to engage with or have long engaged with that were like attracted not by being sold to by you, but by hearing your story from others?
I would say majority of all my clients have come from those stories. They've all come from other people telling those stories and building those relationships like that. They know where I've come from. They know what my story is. I don't really get people who don't know that. They've been passed on from other people.
Okay, well, let me ask you this. When they engage with you, and even if that engagement is just getting to know you to see if it's a good fit or not, what do they tell you is the reason they came to you?
I think the fact that I'm a business owner for most of them, because I can relate to that they've got a business that actually sells them. It's like I'm on their side. I'm not just a creative who's living in creative world and dreaming and coming up with amazing things. I actually understand business. So when we start the conversation, that's important to them. If they're not making money, they can't pay me. So I'm really coming from that big picture direction. Like, okay, what's your business? What are you selling? um, what is great about you? And that's how we build the brand. And when you said before, oh, how do you deal with different brands? It's like when it's a true story, it's not hard to remember. Like
Ah,
when you
yep.
know who the people are, like it's not hard for me to know. As soon as, I've worked with them, I know their story. I know who they are. I've found out their values. And that was one of why I want to help teaching is what I've realized a lot of people don't actually know their own values. They don't know their own stories. Really, they haven't paid attention. They're so worried about other people's stories and looking, oh, I want to be like them. Look what they're doing. And they're the stories they want. And so they base their story on looking at other people instead of going, okay, what is actually my story? Who am I? What are my values? And, the perception of self is what your brand is almost, I believe. If you don't believe it, how the hell are you going to sell it? How the hell is this going to work long term if it's not your truth? So that's what I've realized with a lot of people, especially who I've watched with personal branding. They're very self-unaware almost. They're living externally. And that is part of the failure because they haven't bothered to think, what are my values?
Oh, my Lord, you're speaking my language. In fact, if you're a longtime listener of this podcast, you know what I'm going to say next. Nonfiction brands know who they are so they can be it. And that's the thing. You have to know who you are. You have to be self aware enough. And part of that self awareness is not everyone's going to love me. That's why I need that's why I need to find the people who will not only put up with me, but love me. And that's a subset of humanity in my case. I'm just speaking for myself here because well, for example, you kind of alluded to this that you were referring to what I think of as influencer personal brands. Kind of the hot 20-year-old in the bikini on the beach with the makeup and the hair blowing exactly right. And then you see countless others try to copy that individual, call it the Kylie Jenner effect or something like that. And you realize, yeah, you realize what they're trying to do is be a bad carbon copy of Kylie Jenner or whoever, Dua Lipa, whoever it is. And it's like, you'll never be them because they already occupy that position. And you will be nothing but a pale imitation of them. Why not instead be the 100% true, completely you personal brand by figuring out what that brand is, like what's important to you? Like I had
Mhm.
just been talking to you about, okay, so why do people come to you? Why do they say they come to you? What's the first thing out of their mouths? And you kind of said, well, I came because I understand you're a business owner and you know what it means to run a business. I don't need a 24-year-old who just came out of design school who may be fantastic, but has never done an annual report or has never or doesn't understand what an annual report actually is meant to do. Instead, I'm willing to pay what you charge and have you become deeply enmeshed with my company and understand our story. And frankly, a whole bunch of intellectual property that we would never want our competitors to know. Because as a business owner, you know that intellectual property is the only thing that differentiates us from someone who does exactly what we do in a slightly different way.
I have to get to know them. I have to get in their business and be part of it. Know where they make the money, what do they like doing, what's easy for them to do. That's how you get success, not just by like, oh, I'll just sell that because the business owner said I want to sell that.
Yeah.
Like I believe it's a big picture thing.
Yeah.
It's definitely branding it's big, it's not advertising, it's not a logo. It's I believe from the beginning, your actions. That's why at the beginning, you don't need to spend loads of money because your brand is building as soon as you interact with the customer.
Yeah.
You're starting that interaction in your brand, and that's the story they're going to tell. And they will see your brand by your interactions and your energy.
Yeah. One of the tests or one of the questions I'll ask people when they're talking about how important is brand. I'll say something like, let's say that you have a salesperson on your team who's absolutely fantastic and has the highest numbers of anyone who sells what you're creating for people. Is it ever possible that your brand would tell you to fire that person, to let them go? My answer to that is yeah, absolutely. Because if that person is toxic, if that person is tearing apart your team, if that person is painting your brand, maybe they're making the short-term sale but losing the long-term relationship, yeah, you need to let that person go. And here in the United States, we have our own sports teams. I'm sure they're similar to those in Australia, where a sport team will hire a top player to come in and turn a losing team around. They pay a ton of money to that top player, and that top player can't turn the team around because they are toxic. Now they're very high performing, but they can't turn that team around. However, there have been teams that literally don't go for just the big name, the marquee player, but they look for someone that is completely aligned with their brand foundation, their core value foundation. And that one fish, adding that one fish to the aquarium can make that aquarium thrive because they are aligned with that brand. Okay, I'm switching from sports to fish, but I hope you're
I
following
get what you're saying.
where I'm
I think
going.
internally, a company, one of the companies I work with for a long time, they've grown bigger. They're going over the 50 to 100 staff. And when you get to that point, you need your brand values almost advertised to your staff. You need to
Absolutely.
bring it's having that strength. I've loved watching and working with them, bringing that leadership team up and those people from the floor up, and seeing those boys over 12 years now are leading departments. And as a company, yeah, with management, we've worked on really almost, I call it's like you're internally advertising to bring that team spirit and to bring them together. What can we do? So they're proud of working here, and then they're giving, they want to stay here. It's expensive as a business owner for staff to keep coming in and out. I've got to train someone, I've got to look for someone new. So you want to build those, especially I think when you're larger, you need almost that internal branding. Your message has to be strong throughout everyone who's working, because as you say, you have someone loose who's not standing by your company, they can really damage your brand a lot. the internal workings of your brand and externally if they start loose, not treating customers correctly.
Yeah, like one of the stories I'll often tell when I do presentations about the value of having a brand is the I kind of illustrate the value of having a brand by showing a brand that was destroyed, but it was completely aligned as a brand, and that brand is Uber, right? Back in the days of Travis Kalanick, the founder of Uber, very rough elbows, sharp elbows, very forgiveness, not permission oriented culture. Go, 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 go. Violate regulations left, right, and center, but go, go, go. And that's true disruption. And for the longest time, he was kind of like the prince of disruption, right? Well, then he got into trouble, and overnight, a video went up on social media, that powerful group of channels, and it showed him berating one of his drivers. And that company shed 3 billion, that's billion with a B, dollars worth of market capitalization in 24 hours because the CEO of the company blew it up. But here's the thing that I make the point about. Travis Kalanick was the brand. Uber followed his example. So much so that the day after he was let go by the board of directors of Uber, something like 2,000 to 5,000 Uber associates signed a petition to get him reinstated. What they were saying is, he is the brand. We want to be like that. And the board of directors, I think very rightly said, that's great. We can't be that brand anymore. Why? Because more than 50% of the people who take our rideshare rides are female. And a rough, slightly misogynistic brand is not going to allow us to grow. We need to clean ourselves up. So what did they do? They brought in some very high profile, highly qualified female executives and made a very public show of trying to turn that brand around. That is the power of brand. When the CEO of the company is not creating a brand that can thrive, scale, and sustain itself, something has to be done. In this case, kick the founder out of the company.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's it. They did. I think one of the things with them, they got curious too. I've actually seen the lady speak who was on the team, the design team for the Uber logo. And wow, they had a lot of fun. They traveled everywhere asking questions. How is this working in India? How is this working? Trialing different things to really, even though it's a very simplistic logo, to get that brand value, to find out it's not about the logo. It was like, how are we going to work for people? How does it work in this country? What do they want?
And that you're talking about the logo that came after the Travis Kalanick logo,
yes.
Which was, what the heck is that? Is that I don't even know what it is. It started out as a big U for Uber, so you see a big U on a car, that's an Uber, got it. Then it came out this circular thing that looked almost like a circuit board or something with a square in the middle of it. What is it? And then it came back to a very clean, modern typeface, slate gray, charcoal. It's kind of a not a silver, but not a metallic. But anyway, it's simple, modern, clean, almost like Armani in styling. Classic but modern.
Yes.
Great combination. And that's why you need to hire designers. When you were saying in the first episode last week that you study fonts and typography, I'm like, oh my God, I love that. Because I'm like, okay, do you remember the movie Amadeus, or the play by Peter Shaffer, Amadeus? At the end of the first act, Salieri is the court composer for the Emperor of Austria or whatever. And Mozart, this little upstart, comes in, and Salieri had created this piece for him that was dun 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 dun. Mozart heard it once, sat down at the clavichord and started doing variations on it. And it was just, and Salieri's mouth just dropped open. And he, at the end of the play, at the end of the first act, he curses God because God gave him the understanding of what greatness was, but not the talent to achieve it. I am the Salieri of fonts and typography. I can recognize good stuff, but I cannot create it myself. And that's why I'm proud to say I'm a writer. I,
Well,
I
you magic. I think like Kate, when you did the interview with her, both of you, the words you use and the language, it's a pleasure to listen to. And that I believe is just as creative as what I do.
well, it
And
is.
that's why I love collaborating with, I work a lot with copywriters. They come straight on board day one of branding. Before I've done anything, when I'm researching, they're researching. And I love the gel of the way you research and how I research. And then I'm like, whoa, look at this. Now it's exploding
Yeah, well,
because we had those two different directions. There's no
exactly.
point me bringing them in when I get to website stage. If I've brought them in at the beginning, we're all on the same page. Writing the website's easy. We're all moving forward.
And you get excited because, as a writer, I'll go, I think this is kind of okay, but give it to a designer, and then they do something with a headline and just turn it from, I thought that was kind of a clever play on words. And what they did with it typographically just makes it sing. It's like hallelujah, and then it's that excitement engine starts roaring, and that's because you, again, I'm trying to turn this back to the whole subject of the podcast. That's because I know my greatest talent is verbal. I'm not too shabby when it comes to recognizing talent on the design side, and I can kind of do a little bit myself, just enough to be dangerous. But graphic design is one of the things that I will always want to find someone who's better than me at it to do it. The other thing is like video editing. Editing, oh my God, that is such a taste oriented thing. There's a reason that Thelma Schoonmaker has more Oscars for editing Martin Scorsese films than Martin Scorsese has. Because she is one heck of an editor. Anyway, so tell me what you mentioned the fact that your business, having owned a business, is very appealing. If I asked you to pick 3 words that are pillar foundation words or phrases that describe you as a brand in a way that would communicate the majority of your value to a potential client, what would those 3 words or phrases be?
As a personal brand, I would say their kindness, curiosity, and fun. That as my personal, there I've realized my most important values in life. I like to have fun. And when I asked other people who I just put it out there, please describe me, that was in every description that came back to me. You're fun. And I also think that's why people like working with me. Even in Burning Love Creative, I try to find positivity in most, like enjoy the job while we're doing it. Even if I'm mopping the floors, let's sing and maybe dance with the mop if we need to. Like I will put in good energy, whatever I'm doing. So I think that positive optimism would be also what people would like as part of my brand.
Yeah. How difficult is that for you to demonstrate in everything you do, including things like posts online? Do you find it a task, or is it, no, I'm just being myself?
I'm just being myself.
That's exactly what it should be.
That's right. That's just me. It's like, this shouldn't be hard, especially personal branding. That's why when people are like, I'm like, well, personal branding, it's not like I'm looking when I'm branding for a business, I'm looking who their customers are and what do their customers like? What do they do? And with a personal brand, you're like, you only have to look at yourself and then let's move on.
Yeah.
Like, but most people, like you said, most people don't really, they're not 100% sure of themselves. You have to know those weaknesses as well, I think, and recognize them and accept them because, like you said, there's lots of people who aren't going to like them.
Yeah. Well, and you'll find this out when you read the book. And thank you, by the way, very much for ordering that book and getting it all the way down to the Antipodes. It's really nice as an author to have another continent exposed to my virus. And, but you'll learn very early in the book where I talk about Tom Peters, the man, the American thought leader, business dude. I mean, he's just amazing. He came up with the idea or first promulgated it or wrote about it in 1997. I know that because I saw the article in 1997 in Fast Company magazine, and it blew me away. The idea, it was an article called A Brand Called You. You can still read it today by going to the fastcompany.com website and look up A Brand Called You. It's well worth reading. And he presented the idea of personal branding not as some type of self-inflation thing or, kind of narcissistic technique or something like that. He just brought up the point that it's important for people to self-package themselves in a way that people can understand why they should engage with you at, like everything about the book is based on that idea about that self-packaging. And I actually, Wikipedia, the definitions change all the time. The one I pulled from 2018, I love because it really highlights the idea that unlike self-improvement, this is not about self-improvement, it's about self-packaging. How do you package yourself so that people can understand your best qualities, the truth about who you are, what you do, and how you do it? And I think that's incredibly important. And by the way, just like you said about yours, when you do it, it's not hard because you are exactly who you are and you are being it. But here's the thing. You have to know who you truly are so you can be it. Now, earlier, I think in the previous week's episode, you mentioned the fact that you went to London when you were a silly girl because you thought you were going to get married. That was a recognition that at age 19, you did not know who Lisa Gallia was. And I see you violently shaking your head right now. And can you talk to me about that? What is the difference between the Lisa of today versus Lisa of 19 in London?
Well, I think we're constantly evolving. Our brain is changing from every interaction we have in the world. And 30 years on, definitely those interactions have molded, you know, I don't think really much negative had happened in my life by the time I was 19. I was very lucky. I traveled around with my family and, I'd had a good life. There was nothing major dramas. But then when you get into the real world, it's not all Walt Disney. There is dragons. And well, that is Walt Disney. You got to go through those paths of being strong. And I think seeing those, I've never experienced mean people in the world. Really being mean to me, I think I'm probably quite likable. But seeing that through my daughter and experience it almost myself has definitely changed who I am as a person.
Well, let me ask you
Um,
this. Going back to the three words you talked about, which were kind, fun, and what was the middle one?
Curious.
Curious. Okay. Was 19-year-old Lisa kind, curious,
This
and
is true.
fun?
Yes.
You're
Yes.
you're shaking your head yes.
I'm 100% yes, I was.
Okay,
Those are my true values, probably. That's why, because
that's
they're my
the
true values.
point. That's the point that I want to make about it. It's like, how you can take any chemical compound and break it down to the elements, and those elements cannot be broken down further. That's the level of thinking you need to do about yourself to come down to the immutable truths and facts and elements about yourself that will not change. My three words: creative, collaborative, provocative. I've always known I had to be creative, even when I wanted to be a scientist, but I couldn't do the math.
Oh, I'm good at math.
Oh, I'm terrible at math. So
So
guess
I'm
what?
good at
If you don't speak math, you can't do science. But I love the creative aspects of it. The collaborative part, that came harder because I wanted everything to be mine until I realized that no, I can get things to a certain level, but collaboration can always make it better, can always make it greater. And while I always wanted to be that little kid coming home from school with a picture that mom puts up on the fridge, I still want that. But I recognize if I really want my mom or the mom in my head to put it up on the fridge, I need to work with someone who's better at typography than me and has better color taste, stuff like that. So I better be collaborative. And then the third one, provocative. This is the part where I've accepted something in myself, which is, wait, I didn't mean to insult you. I was just trying, I was excited. I wasn't angry. I didn't mean to scare you. And sometimes that kind of puppy provocation comes out that, come on, but that's my value to people, which is I'm at least provoking you to get out of your mental frame long enough to take a look back and go, wow, that scares me, but we could and we should do it. So,
100%.
and that's my value to people when they work with me is you're not going to get what you asked for. Well, no, I take that
You
back.
will.
I will show you what you asked for, and then I'll show you something that'll make what you asked for an afterthought. Because the second you see this idea, you're going to go, wow. One, you collaborated with me enough to make me feel like I've got ownership in it. Therefore, I feel like I've participated. Therefore, I like it. I'm pretending to be a client right now. You know, and that, by the way, killer ninja trick. You want people to buy great creative? Invite them into the process. Take their idea and sharpen it and polish it and keep it in, but maybe it's not the central part of it. Doesn't matter. If they've got their fingerprint on it, they love that idea because it's partially theirs. And by the way, a month down the road, it's 100% their idea, which is fine with me.
Exactly. I'm not attached. I'm here to make people shine. That's what I feel I've done with my business. I think it's interesting. Sometimes our biggest strengths are also our weaknesses.
Yeah.
They can flip when sometimes I'm a bit too curious. I do upset people with questions. That's what I like to do. Sometimes maybe I shouldn't be so fun. I would have, I've got to accept I'm not the best at doing repetitive tasks. So you can't always have fun, Lisa.
Well, and that's
But
part
it's
of,
also one of my strengths. So it's a balance, definitely.
but that's the essence of self-awareness. You're aware of not only what you're good at, but what you're bad at, what you really don't care about. Like the fact that I'm not a big fan of social media has made me reassess what I do because I started to want to be like other people. I hate to say this, but I started doing it. Like finding people that I wanted to be like. And I'm not talking stylistically. I'm like, I should have a business like Jay Bear, who is a big guy here in the United States, and how he does stuff. Because I want to do speaking. Yes, I still want to do that. But the idea of like doing courses, I thought, I should do some courses. Create my own courses, let people buy them, do the whole Amy Porterfield selling, launching stuff, the Kate Toon stuff, build my own mini empire and all that stuff. Guess what? It didn't really stick, because it's not me.
Exactly. I had the same when I met Kate. I think I was at a conference. She spoke. We met in a dodgy pub. We've both, like you, been in the same industry. We went off, had a great night together. And I was like, I need to be like that. I should be making courses. Look what she's doing. She's not writing anymore. And then I've like watched her journey and been part with her journey. And that more and more, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Like, there's no way I would be passionate to a group. She's amazing what she gives to the group, but it's definitely, I'm not up for that.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't like to do that long-term repetitively. So you got to find what makes you happy each day and what you enjoy doing. And I believe also is our job, ask customers that, because that's actually how they have successful businesses.
Yeah, exactly. It all comes back to knowing deeply not only who you are as a service provider, but the depth of the truth of the clients you serve. So you can really tell their true stories via type, via color, via copy, via experience, via every touch point in that you can affect as a collaborator of theirs. You know, I love to say a brand is everything from your CEO's public behavior to the way you answer your phones. And it's
100%.
true. Well, this has been a fascinating conversation, and I really like meeting you. You know, Lisa is one of those people who I got to know through the inimitable Kate Toon of Sydney, Australia, who is a big friend of mine. And when you talked about meeting her in a dodgy pub, I'm like, oh yeah, I get that because that's exactly how we meet, or that's exactly how we met. Well, it wasn't a dodgy pub, but it was still drinks were being served, and it was an instant. I get you. And
One,
I get the depth of you. You know, she was giving me crap in about 30 seconds. And I'm like, any woman who feels comfortable doing that, I like. And Lisa, evidently you're of that same stripe or of that, you've got that DNA. So it's been a treat getting to know you a little bit better. I want to let others who might be listening to the podcast know how they can contact you if they were interested in engaging with you. What is the best way for them to get in touch with you?
the best way to get in touch is just shoot me a DM in Instagram at the Lisa Gallia, and or you can contact me through my website lisagallia.com. But Instagram's where I'm there. If you want to shoot me a quick line, I'm happy to chat and just get social.
Now, there you go. And Galea is spelled Galea. So definitely check her out. Well, that's it for this week's Nonfiction Brand Podcast. I, of course, am DP Knudten, and she is
Lisa Gallia.
And I'll be talking at you again next week. Bye-bye. And nonfiction, well, anyone who's watching the live stream, I'm kicking you off. So I will see you later